Hello, everyone. This is Athens-Clarke County Mayor Kelly Girtz, here to talk a little bit about our local response activities that we are layering here on top of the federal and state opportunities that many of you are accessing. In Athens, we implemented shelter in place around the 19th of March, so pretty early relative to much of the state and much of the region, but recognizing when we looked at Southeast Asia and Italy and the West Coast that we needed to move quickly to, as everybody has heard, flatten the curve. That's paid dividends on a per capita basis. We're doing very well compared to most of the population centers in the state and also compared to our neighbors, although we believe that our neighbors, in terms of local residents, have somewhat taken a cue from our order and helped out enormously. We knew right away that we were going to have to access some funds and deploy those both for business purposes as well as for indigent aid and other ongoing supports for the population. Um, we looked at a couple of our existing authorities. We didn't believe that our Industrial Development Authority or Economic Development Authority were the right tool for business support. Um, and we also tried to go ahead and restructure ourselves as we recognized that we were going to be in this situation for many months. And so we've engaged an emergency management structure where we have a communications division and operations division for internal activity, and then an outward facing division for community support. We, like many of you, also had to determine what do we do around operations. So we essentially hit a 1 week pause the week after our shelter in place ordinance while we considered what facilities could remain open, what could we do around permitting and building inspections and that kind of thing. Ultimately, we have kept our linear parks or trails open for recreation purposes, but closed our formal play activities like baseball diamonds and basketball courts. And we've reopened all of our permitting operations. So anybody seeking a permit can do that. This in some ways has provided us an early opportunity to shift some of our operations online, which we're planning on doing anyhow. So permitting has now moved in that direction. In addition to seeking the right conduit for business support, we also needed to figure out what we could do to provide for some direct aid to residents. Our initial interest was in unsheltered persons, given the challenge of that situation with the crisis layered on top, but thinking more broadly about how the entire population in Athens will likely need some food support and other kinds of support. The state of Georgia's gratuities clause that's embedded in the Constitution is something of a limiting factor for providing direct aid. And even in our own charter, we discovered that we really are not explicit enough about demonstrating that part of our mission is providing aid and resources to the community through nonprofits. So we're going to be amending our charter in addition to asking the state to be a little more nuanced in the way that it delivers understanding about the gratuities clause. Our legal team was somewhat challenged to determine how we could provide some business loans. And so to facilitate that, we've set up a joint development authority with the city of Winterville, and we're going to stock that with $1 million of funds to provide some relatively small scale interest free business loans, probably with a $5,000 to $10,000 per person or per business cap. Because we've had several good budget years and we've long been interested in cutting poverty in the community, which is quite significant. Many of you may not realize that for a university community, 30% of our population has lived in poverty, and that's chronically been true. So we took $3 million and redeployed that for broad community aid. And so we sent $150,000 immediately to some homeless providers, and then we are likely to deploy somewhere in the $2 to $4 million range of funds over the next year for food and shelter and other aid for the population at large. In addition to needing food, we found that the community is hungry for information. And so we've begun a weekly community conversation television series just so that we can focus chunk by chunk on information that the public will find valuable in this crisis. We very much understand that this isn't a crisis that's going to go away 2 weeks or 6 weeks or even 6 months from now. So our planning right now extends at least through fiscal year 2021. And so we're going to continue to provide some of that food, shelter, and sanitation aid, likely for over the next year as the ebbs and flows in this crisis continue. We also are developing the Athens Community Core. And the idea at the outset is that we'll have some small scale environmental and capital needs that we'll be able to satisfy through part-time employment for members of our community who might have otherwise been unemployed or underemployed or undereducated. And our interest is extending this program beyond this crisis, not only to take care of those community needs that are physical needs that you might see on the street, but also to shift some of those individuals from clearing kudzu to learning to be a CDL driver or learning to be a certified arborist or other kinds of activities. We've been interested in workforce development as a local government endeavor. And so this crisis, I think, has spurred us to move even faster to make sure that people who otherwise would have had relatively little employment opportunity can get some that we can help facilitate. Wish you all well out there. Please contact me anytime. My contact information is here on the last slide.